Hello, everyone, and welcome to my brand new podcast. My name, as I'm sure you know, is Mrs. Bennet, and I am the mother of 5 daughters, the majority of whom are successfully married. My daughter Mary told me that I should begin by explaining to you all the reason that I started this podcast, and so I suppose I shall follow her advice, for though she is a dreary and boring child, she listens to so many podcasts and reads so many books. She must know something. You see, dear listeners, it is my life's work to see each and every one of my daughters successfully married. Many young girls are not nearly as fortunate as mine, and don't have mothers as dedicated to their successful matrimony as I am. I have decided, in a sort of philanthropic act, if you will, to share my vast wealth of knowledge with the general public, to help disadvantaged daughters make the most advantageous marriages possible. I'm sure you all know this already, as my daughters are quite well known about town, but just this past year I have arranged 3 highly respectable marriages. First, my youngest, Lydia, is married to a most handsome officer in the Royal Air Force. My 2 eldest daughters, Jane and Elizabeth, have both married very, very, very wealthy and successful businessmen, and are living in large mansions not too far away. My Jane's Mr. Bingley is so handsome and charming, and my Lizzie's husband is... oh, well, he's very, very rich. I'm so happy to have so many daughters so well married. All right, enough intro. In this first episode, I will tell you how I got my youngest daughter married to an officer. But first, a word from our sponsors. Hello, listeners! This program is supported by Audible. Audible is the leading provider in downloadable digital audiobooks. I just love Audible. Audible is the best! If you use my promo code MARRIAGE, you can get a free audiobook to listen to. Isn't that just exciting? Welcome back, listeners. Let's just dive right in. Ever since I was a girl, I've always had a certain fondness for military men, especially the Royal Air Force. They just look so dashing in their blue-grey coats. Anyway, I always encouraged the girls to walk into Meryton when the officers were in town, and that is where my girls met George Wickham. What a handsome boy! That brings me to my first piece of advice for scoring a military man. Location, location, location. Wherever these officers are, that is where your daughter has to be. Now, someone may call this stalking, but I think that sounds too harsh. You can't just sit around swiping through Tinder. You must be active in your pursuit. Next, you must sure to facilitate and encourage social gathering. I always encourage my girls to go to every party possible, and it really has paid off. That is, after all, where Jane met Charles. But I'll get into that in the next episode. I do love a good teaser. Back to Lydia and George. Now, oh goodness, I forgot to silence my cell. Oh, how perfect is Lydia. She can help tell the story. Hello, Lydia. Say hi to listeners.
What listeners?
Of my podcast. You're my special guest.
Does anyone even listen to podcasts?
Of course they do. You're going to be famous.
I'm in.
I was just telling the listeners about you and George, how you met at Bingley's housewarming party.
Oh, yes. George saw me in my dress and it was love at first sight. He had to play hard to get, though, as you know, so he pretended to flirt with Lizzie. Can you even imagine? He must have had such a boring night. Anyway, everyone knows that to get a man to fall in love with you, you have to flirt with someone else. So I flirted with practically every officer at the party.
Oh, yes, you were the belle of the ball. Of course, I knew from the beginning that you and George were meant for each other. I do have a sense for these kinds of things. That's why I single-handedly convinced your father to allow you to go to Brighton with the officers. I wasn't even worried when you ran away.
Yes, I did know why Lizzie and the others were making a fuss. I texted the family group chat saying I had eloped and not died. I mean, Dad even tried to track my phone. Just because George was 26 and I was 17 at the time doesn't mean it's any cause to freak out. Besides, my 18th birthday was in a couple of months.
Exactly. Of course, I remained perfectly calm the entire time. I knew I had absolutely nothing to worry about, especially because George is such a handsome, charming, honourable man.
Oh, yes, he's so dreamy. Speaking of George, I was wondering if we could borrow some money. He wants to buy a guitar so he can start a band.
Ooh, does he play?
No, not yet, but he's going to learn. That reminds me, could you throw in a little extra for some lessons?
Of course, dear. Anything for my favourite child.
Thanks, Mum. Got to go.
Bye-bye, darling. Oh, what a sweet girl. Turned out the best of all of them, if I do say so myself. Except maybe Jane. Now, I do believe it's time for my favourite segment, Keeping Up with Kitty. And Mary, I guess. As you all know, Kitty and Mary are my only unmarried daughters, and in this segment I will recount with you all my efforts in order to find them matches. This week I made them both Tinder accounts. Kitty has been doing well and has been on a few dates this week already. So far, she doesn't seem to have met anyone very eligible, but there's still time. Mary, on the other hand, hasn't made a single match. I keep telling her she has to choose a profile picture where her face is mostly in shadow, but she won't listen. She's such a frustrating girl. Nevertheless, I shall continue with my efforts, and I am confident that she will soon have a husband. Anyway, that's all for the show today. Next week, how I manage my favourite coupling of them all, Jane and Charles. For now, don't forget to rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, and to email me with any questions at mrsbennetpodcast@gmail.com. Have a lovely week!